Yeah, just a couple of brief points. I mean, I think the ESB scheme was always a defined benefit scheme, as was the IASS scheme, but it didn't stop 10 years of argument and trying to change and undermine the benefits to the members of that scheme and measures undertaken by the company, and years of adjudication in front of the Pensions Board and all the rest. And in actual fact, what was happening in the ESB recently is a carbon copy of what happened and started in the IASS scheme over 10 years ago. And I think that's actually a strong argument for why we need a tighter provision in this part of the legislation, because I don't accept that these pension schemes are less likely to wind up. In actual fact, the IASS proposal is to precisely stop the defined benefit scheme, have a defined contribution scheme going forward, but also has a scenario at the moment where people who are paying into that scheme now, for every euro they put in, are going to look at getting about 30 cents back out of it, and are looking at a retirement pension of about less than €100 a week, which is absolutely crazy. So while the company voluntarily set up that scheme, and that is absolutely the case, it wasn't voluntary for the employee. And some of the decisions taken by the employer have had a substantial impact on the scheme and the performance of the scheme, because we could have a debate over whether longer life expectancy is a contributing factor, but what was definitely a huge factor on these pension schemes was the move to outsource work, move away from direct employment, which meant that a lot less workers, if you like, there was a growing pensioner body because there had been previous direct employees to do work that was subsequently outsourced to private companies who didn't have pension benefits, so there was less people feeding an older population. I think early retirement schemes, strain factors not being adequately factored in voluntary severance schemes, where it led to an uncoordinated benefit and an extra cost on the scheme. They were decisions that were taken and agreements that were entered into with people who are pensioners now, people who are deferred pensioners now, who are going to be impacted on this. And, you know, I suppose the point is that employers are trying to wind up these schemes now. What we're trying to do is that if they try and exploit the present situation to do that and get out of their commitments, that we put a penalty on that. So in actual fact, you could say the provisions that we're putting in are encouraging them to keep the schemes open, because if they walk away from them when they have the financial ability to keep them going, they're going to be penalised anyway, so that it's not the pensioners and the state that's fitting up the tab. And again, I think we have to see it is that the courts have established that trustees of pension schemes are a contingent creditor in this scenario. So there is a legal liability and the pension board adjudication. Can I just ask, in terms of the cross-border multi-company schemes, I mean, for people who are, it's the opposite in some ways of the Waterford Glass thing, but people who are UK workers who are members of, say, for example, the IASS scheme, of which there are over 1,000, who as British workers would expect a legislative protection vis-a-vis their peers in Britain. Where do they stand in terms of that situation here in a European context?
Okay, is there any other contributions?